Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to go into our first match of the day here. First match of 5, and just remember, they are best of 3s, so these might go by a little bit quicker than you are used to seeing in the past few weeks, and then we'll see going forward. But Specialist does lend itself to a best of 3 format and not a best of 5, so it all makes sense. But we are going to be seeing We're going to see BoarControl versus Casie up as our first match of the day, and we are going to be delving into that Priest versus Mali Druid and get to just see more of these matchups. It's definitely something I enjoy, each day as the weekend, continues, just seeing a little bit more of each matchup, just seeing how they play out, what the players choose to do differently, and maybe even if some strategies change of swapping decks or not. We've seen some players go to secondary and then lose and switch back to main, or stick with main, unlike they did in previous series, like we saw from Psycho yesterday.
Exactly, yeah. Psycho switching up his strategy from series to series here. But I think the equation is pretty simple for Boar. He has the Priest setup that we saw from numerous players from the same practice group, where the secondary is hard weapon destruction for Warrior and Rogue and anti-aggro stuff. And then the tertiary is the Priest Mirror that those players have also been using against Highlander Mage, which removes Mindrender Alusha for a couple of extra value cards and a little bit of extra tempo swing with the Headmaster Kel'Thuzad. So I think, Boar's layout will be pretty straightforward. I think Casey's layout will be pretty straightforward as well, because I don't think, either of his techs are particularly aimed hard at Priest, particularly the secondary, which is the kind of hard anti-aggro variation where you stop playing Mali Druid, essentially. You cut all of the Mali combo cards, the Mali, the Omu, the Germination, and you throw Broom in there, you throw Bees in there, you throw Lake Threshers in there for some extra anti-aggro power. Definitely not what he's going to be wanting against Priest, so I imagine it is primary all the way for Casie.
And that's definitely, I think, been one of the strengths of Mali Druid in this format, is if your deck primary, without really doing anything from its normal state, already does well versus what you expect to be most popular, then that opens up your secondary and tertiary to deal with almost anything else. And I think that's why we've been seeing multiple Mali Druids get there, in terms of making it into the top 8 after the Swiss. So I expect some good things here from Casie and this Mali Druid, although I would expect a little bit more from the opening hands.
Yeah, I think both players gave their opener a bit of an oof here. Boar did find the Disciple off the top, but double Beast draw plus the Mali in the opening hand, this is one of the things with Mali Druid in general, is that you have so many copies of patches in your deck, right? So many minions that you just don't want to draw. You want to tutor them out somehow, be it via Geppetto in some builds and via Guardian Animals when it comes to the beasts in the deck. Casey's version is a little bit better because he actually doesn't play Geppetto in the deck, so there's no inherent downside to drawing a Mali. He's kind of reliant on the Omu combo for really busting out huge Malagos combos. So having the Mali maybe necessarily isn't the worst thing, but it's the one thing with Mali Druid is it's a very slimmed down beast package. They generally only run 4, as is the case here with Casie, double Teacher's Pet, double Twilight Runner. So currently he is only 1 beast draw away from at least partially busting one of his Guardian Animals.
Yeah, and although this isn't strictly true, especially as you mentioned in this specific list, but because you are running all these extra tools, it often is just more tools that can get clogged in hand, right? Because you look at this list, the big one that sticks out to me versus some other Druid builds is there's no nature studies, and which is such a flexible card to have in the early game, whether it makes it kind of ramps for you if you go into a ramp spell, but without as many cards of these early game progression cards, then there are hands that look like this occasionally, right, where you've got 2 9-cost dragons just stuck in your hand. And I know they could be Kel'Thas and some other cards, but just with some of that extra early game missing, it can feel bad just a little bit more often. But BoarControl, although it didn't have the best opening hand, has managed to stick things on board right now, and he does have some other options this turn too.
He does, yeah. Things are proceeding fairly nicely for him here, really kind of dictated by the fact that Casie hasn't hit the ramp. Casie sat with, 40 mana's worth of cards in his hand and no ramp to be able to play them all, and his hand isn't even remotely full. He's really not going anywhere too fast here, which means Boar is pretty much free to just do what you want to be doing against Druid, which is try and develop some pressure here. Does have to have considerations about, maybe whether this slow start leads to a Lightning Bloom pop-off over the coming turns. So maybe He doesn't want to develop hard into a Guardian Animal sweep if it's Bloom Guardian Animals this turn, but there were no kept cards from Casie, so I don't think you necessarily have any read that the hand contains any kind of quality whatsoever.
I think with the, 3 draws or so that the players have had, I think BoarControl is sat here just going, okay, he didn't keep anything, but what if he's drawn it? Like, what is the actual worst case? And I'm not saying you should always play around worst case, but you should think about it, right? Like, what if there is a Bloom Guardian Animals? What does my turn look like this turn? What's it look like the turn after? So I think there was just a pause there just to decide when there's potential for Druid to hit 7 mana one way or another. You do just have to sit back and consider your turn.
You do, but since he had Vilefiend to develop Dormant anyway, there wasn't really any extra punish. I think playing Wretched Tutor there was probably ambitious. He was never really going to coin anything out, so I think it was fairly straightforward. No real downside to the play, just to add the additional Dormant minion, because Casie would not get full value with a Bloom Guardian Animals play here anyway.
Time rip looks fairly clean for me here. Originally, however silly this may sound, I was wondering, depending on what the board state was going to look like, if BoarControl was considering like a coin Kronks, which like looks terrible, but against Druid that seems to be whiffing, maybe an early 6/6 would do well, even though there was a Galakron in hand.
I was going to say, like, I just want to be clear before we establish how insane this suggestion is. You do know there's a Galakron in his hand, right?
But I'm talking, was he even considering that, thinking about it as early as turn 4, turn 3 maybe? Well, the Teacher's Pet obviously changed all that, and now suddenly the Teacher's Pet has continued to change the game, because that Mukla is huge. That wasn't supposed to happen. The Brewmaster was, most of the time, supposed to be able to clear up that beast.
That wasn't supposed to happen. Admin, hello, can you take a look at my game? This is illegal.
Can I get a beast check?
Yeah. That is a complete disaster. You're absolutely right. BoarControl should have been in complete control himself after that turn. Vast majority of the time, the minion at least doesn't threaten back the other way. Like, even if it's a 3/4, which, can happen, it's not going to challenge your minions as they come out on the following turn. So Mukla was kind of the only one there that was an absolute disaster.
I was looking at options there. BoarControl, I think, was considering Coin Soul Mirror, which you can see why. He can actually finish off the Teacher's Pet. The Mukla dies. But Soul Mirror is so good in this matchup. Does he want to do it that early? He could play Wretched and just coin, and that does a decent chunk of the job. Not quite as good, of course, but...
Yeah.
Tough turn, honestly, for BoarControl. At least the way I saw it. Big follow-up here from Casie, cleaning these up nicely. Okay, well, suddenly, Casey's hand is looking quite good.
Yeah, suddenly the appeal of still having a Kronks in your hand seems quite important as well, right?
Oh, I wasn't like saying, no, we should have done it. It was just a suggestion.
Oh, it's too early. It's too early, Rave.
I like to start off quick. Right.
Yeah.
I think having a 6/6 on board, pretty solid, but let's be reasonable here. The Kronks is going to do a lot of work right now, but I'm just staring at Casey's hand. Like, yes, the Kronks can come down and wipe the board.
Yep.
Casey gets the Zigzor Priming deck, of course, but look at that. That is, it's kind of just lethal, right? If you look at it in a certain way.
It is quite lethal, yes.
Needs a couple of turns, because Casey's drawn, 0 ramp this game?
Wow, Boris.
Every way.
Yes, I mean, I was going to ask about this because Soul Mirror is interesting here. It does draw 4 cards. He doesn't have the ability to hold them all, but it is still a net gain for him. Draw 3, burn 2, potentially, including the one that he's going to burn next turn. And he does preserve that Kronks for more flexibility later on. So I was going to say, this is the alternate option if he did want to go that way, because he might feel the game accelerating quickly, and all of a sudden he might need cards like Apotheosis, Renew, ways to generate Radiance, Zephyrus, all of these cards that he didn't necessarily have access to. And although he is burning cards, as I mentioned, it is a net gain, because he does get to, of the 5 total cards drawn, including that one burned there off the top at the start of turn phase, he does get to keep 3 of them.
I definitely like the plan, and when Zephyrus popped in his hand, I was like, okay, this is a big deal. But I want to draw your attention back to Casey's hand, which is very quickly just lethal. So
It is quite lethal, yes. We've established this, yeah.
Yes, and it still is. I really liked the Alex Straza from Casie. Just getting it down, creating another level of threat, as well as, of course, making the 15 damage difference and having the Anubis out there to peel that 3 armor. But what's the response now? Because I think Boar has to achieve like 3 big things in the next turn or so. It's whether he can actually pull that off.
Ooh, a Mally of your own. Of your very, very own. Takes the Onyx Mage Scribe, though, does seem more reasonable.
Oh, well, that's just lethal, right?
Lightning Bloom first. Yeah.
And then go with the... Yep. I believe so. Look. And BoarControl's face confirms.
Yep. Refreshes once to get the Mally down, refreshes a second time, not that you would need it here, off the newly generated Omu.
And honestly, for me, Sol, as game 1 does end, of course, that was the weirdest of games from Casey's side, right? Because he drew none of his ramp, right? So you can say, okay, well, if you're not drawing a lot of your ramp, then you're drawing all your other cards, which is initially quite bad, but he had 15 cards left in his deck and just had the combo, like pretty much on curve without the ramp, of course. So it was one of those, I'm not sure whether it was a good draw or a bad draw, because if he'd drawn all the ramp, he wouldn't have it would have maybe took him longer to get to the actual combo. I don't know. It's just a weird game to look at, honestly. But you can see now that it was a little bit early, you could argue. But what can Priest do versus that if the combo is acquired? There's not a lot of counterplay really for Priest, unless you can maybe get an armor smith like we saw in APAC and generate a ton of extra armor.
Don't talk to me about that APAC series. I'm still feeling a certain kind of way about it, Raven. It was both like sick and insane and unbelievably good, and then also unbelievably weird and bad at the same time. Like I have no concept of what happened for that 2 hours or so, or however long it took. But yeah, so Casey's draw kind of like it stopped like 1 card short of being really, really terrible, right? Because he drew like expensive card, beast. If he'd have then drawn like 1 Twilight Runner, that's a completely different game of Hearthstone, because then his Guardian Animals only draws 1 Twilight Runner, he only draws 2 cards instead of 4, so then he's further away from those, last 2 or 3 cards he ended up drawing, which were finishing off his lethal combo in the end, right? So you can see how the potential of his opening hand to make the game really terrible for him existed, but the fact that it didn't, like, you're kind of right in framing it in the way of there's a lot of the deck that just involves ramping and drawing through your deck to get to the combo pieces. Alternatively, you can just draw the combo pieces and not have to deal with any of that. That does work too.
Yeah, it was. You could see the impact those Twilight Runners make, and why, honestly, without Twilight Runner, the deck just wouldn't really work, and I don't think Druid Guardian Animals would even be remotely as good without Twilight Runner, because it's just more and more card draw. We are going very quickly, though, into our game number 2, and just an update, Casie, as expected, kept on his main deck. It is just the deck that will be Priest anyway, so it seems sensible. BoarControl moved over to his tertiary list, which has removed a lot of the anti-aggro tools and added the Psychic Conjurer, Thoughtsteal, Volpera Scoundrel, Shadowword Ruin, and Headmaster Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I expected to see. It's what we saw, I believe, from the other player who was playing the same strategy going up against Druid. It does seem to have a nice sort of secondary effect where Shadowword Ruin can be pretty effective to have some tempo swings. Even with a bit of time, like you could potentially be able to deal with this with Shadowword Ruin to deny the card draw. Headmaster Kel'Thuzad can create board swings, which is enormous against Druid. That's what you want to be doing. And just the added ability to maybe find some of that early ramp from Psychic Conjurer, from Thoughtsteal, to be able to keep up, as you see Boar here going for Zephyrus into Wild Growth for much the same thing. I do think this this tertiary list does have a nice, well-rounded spread of positive matchups. I'm not sure how many of those were deliberate and how many were happy accidents, but I do think it is perhaps being played a little bit more than we might have expected in the beginning.
Yeah, and the big deal for me is the cards. Oh, that was pretty good. The cards that are allowed to be removed, I think, is almost like genius level, right? because if you don't need the aggro tools, like almost any priest card you could include instead of that are probably going to make a lot of other matchups good, right? So I think like being able to just freely select those, you know, the Thought Steal, the Volpera for the extra value, and not really losing anything out because you don't need anti-aggro cards against True and against some other matchups. So I like this approach to the deck building a lot.
Nature speaks through us.
You want to see Sol's all-time favorite card ever?
Speaker Gidra? Heck yeah. Naughty.
pretty cool order in there.
Yeah, just a small example of Gidra's true power here.
It can become a 2/5.
It's one of the things that you do have to be aware of with Mali Druid, though. Even though it's a very late game focused combo deck, you do still want to be spending your mana through the early turns because you need hand space, right? We've seen issues. I think ETC hit some problems with this last night in the Americas region where he just didn't have hand space and was forced into spots where he had to like overflow and just concede to burning 2 cards, which is something that Casie would like to avoid here, so he's making his sure his hand stays nice and empty. So not only can he pick up the cards here from the Twilight Runner that he gets off the Guardian Animals, but if he's to then draw into overflow, thank you very much, he's able to be in a situation with enough hand sides again that he can just rip that overflow and keep cycling.
And
I just love it when the game just demonstrates your points for you, right? It's a wonderful
it never gets
feeling.
to work for me. It's because my point throw is so weird.
Yeah,
The game
fair
never-
enough.
Apart from those odd times where a player just does what I say, even if I'm joking, and that we have to just reassess what's going on in life at that point.
What was that game where you like, I wonder if he should, and your play was like, you left lethal on board.
Yes!
Like, it actually conceded the game, and I was like, Raven, that concedes the game, you leave lethal on board. And then the player just did it. Like,
Think about it this way, Sol. It's not my job to say what the best play is. I'm just trying to get into the mindset of the player, and I think I nailed
Right.
it that time.
right.
I will say, though, I'll finish my point. It's also the huge benefit of a newbie sat in this deck, right? Because most of the time when you are trying to either, dump some hand space, you're playing big spells, which means it's just a card for 0 mana you just throw out. And you can just throw out there. There's no big impactful turn you need to wait for it or anything like that. It's just a good card on board.
Yeah, agreed. Plus, of course, the added anti-aggro benefits, which I think is something that the original Mali Druid lists were way too tilted towards, being an anti-control deck, to having the most insane Mali Druid combos possible. I like this list a lot more when it comes with the Nibsat Defenders, a little bit of extra aggro security, Crystal Power being in the deck as well. I'm going to give credit to Orange because he's where I first saw this build of the deck. I'm not sure if he is the actual innovator of the build, but I really like it, and it's kind of restored a little bit of my faith in Mali Druid for a ladder deck, at least overall. Specialists, I think it's right on point.
It's going to be a clean turn here from BoarControl. Does have access to that Galakron and the Renew for the Kronks as well. So he can actually just, probably trade and still leave a Kronks on the board. Let's not talk about Mukla. So it is available. There's also just the Innovate Penance option post Galakron as well, if BoarControl so desires. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm never going to be upset with someone just dropping an 8/8 on the board.
He also didn't check the Teacher's Pet first? Okay, he's not going to check the Teacher's Pet at all. Fair enough.
I guess it just gives Casie the push, but for no reason, right? If he trades.
Yeah. You also, so if you're making a play like that and you are going to trade, you should generally trade first because Emperor Cobra is a thing, and then obviously you don't just want to play Dragon Queen on Extraza, but if Boar was intending to never trade, then no harm done.
And there we go. I just love it when a game kind of proves your point.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if he hadn't have dumped Gidra Crystal Power on that turn, right?
It's starting to get pretty interesting, though, because Casie generally does not have a good way to kill a Deathwing. And I'm not suggesting he should play it right now at all before Sol starts laughing at me. But let's just pretend he can get Galakron down and then maybe use up this death and maybe the Murazond in the next turn or so. I think there is a bit of merit to just saying Deathwing, let's go. Because the longer he lets Casie just draw his deck, guess what's going to happen? Same as last game.
Yep. I mean, there's 6 cards left in the deck, and you haven't seen any of the key cards get burned yet, right? So you're just waiting for 30 at this point. It's kind of what's happening. So you've got to have some kind of plan. If there was a few cards left in the deck, a few cards more left in the deck, I could potentially see a long-term game plan where Boar's like, okay, win board, dominate really hard with like Azure Explorer, pick up like play Proto Drake here, jam that down, get a huge Murazon swing, make Casie bust his Mali combo by like Mali Moonfire swiping my boards to clear, and then boom, Deathwing, end the game. But yeah, he hasn't really got time to make all of that happen, probably from his perspective right now.
That's the issue. If you tried for that, you were dead 10 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the real problem. Casie, though, does have that little bit of a moment right now where he has to look at the board, realize he's going to take a quite large amount of damage next turn if he does nothing.
Yeah.
But he also needs time to play Alexstrasza, and I think most importantly, get to his full combo activation, right? To be able to actually go off. So I do actually like him starting with a card draw, another Overgrowth. Okay, draw again. All these going to go back in the deck, which does stop him hurting from fatigue a little bit as well.
But more importantly, now it like stacks so many draws up on top of his Omu and his second Moonfire, which are the cards he really wants right now.
Are you going to silence anywhere?
I know, right?
Again, here we see just Casie just making room. And now I think no matter what, BoarControl will really want to trade right now. I think that was a bit of a signifier that Casie is fishing. He just played 2 Overgrowths in a turn, facing down, what, 18 damage?
Yeah. I mean, you 100% know that there are combo pieces still in the deck, because if they weren't, you were dead that turn. The full combo does 30, so you were actually just dead that turn if he had the full combo in hand.
Still alive.
Yep. So it's currently remembering 7 spells, I believe. Because each Overgrowth is 2, right? It's the Overgrowth and the excess mana that both go in there. Yeah. Those do, of course, then become card draws as they draw, but, you know, if you draw an Overgrowth, you have to spend 4 on it again before you get the other excess mana. So, like, it's kind of more complex than it looks in terms of how much of a downside this is for this is for Casie, but it certainly is a downside right now. That much is indisputable.
And look at this as well. There's potential that he's going to go for just Galakron for the armor, right? Go up to 35.
Yep, love it.
Looks great to me. He could have done a couple of other things if he wanted to, but I just like this, right? Just be as safe as possible, push damage, and basically set up lethal if Casie doesn't exactly kill Boar. And as you can see, Casie shuffled in more cards.
He just ripped the Moonfire. So Casie's deck now has 2 Overgrowths in it, 2 excess mana, which all draw cards. He has a new Overflow that's gone back into his deck, which is also potentially a huge amount of card draw. But then everything else is kind of garbage apart from the Forest Warden Omu. And here it is. Casie is actually busting his Mali combo on the board state.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm joking. Will now, Sol, is BoarControl going to play a chunk of stuff out and potentially just slam Deathwing?
Well, I think the fact that he can already just kill the Mali, it doesn't even necessarily need to get to that point, right? Like, he kind of just has the game wrapped up.
Is it just lethal with Morazon?
Sometimes, yes.
Gonna see these plays.
It's a good point, actually. What are the Murazon implications here?
Also, he has Penance, right? So regardless, he's going to get a Mali, yeah?
Yeah.
Almost certainly doesn't die. So he has Penance, even if he like Moonfires himself, because he's also seen 2 Moonfires, which means he doesn't strictly need 35 health. Well,
he's also seen the Mali, most importantly.
No, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If the Mali dies as well, he's not really afraid of any burst damage anymore. If the Mali goes down, I'm not gonna lie, Sol, I like it.
He also has Gift of Luminance in his hand, which is, you know, pretty popping if you get yourself a Malagos at some point. Not sure exactly what he can do with it, but it sure is exciting.
Disappointed.
I know. I think after much deliberation, Boar returns to type here and does the play that is significantly more boring, but probably wins the game more often.
Needs to change the way he spells BoarControl as far as I'm concerned.
Got him.
Casie gonna concede, and honestly, I think it was as close to a concede just playing Mali anyway. Of course, Casie had to at that point, or he was 100% lost that game anyway because of lethal on the other side. But playing the Mali and the Moonfires out when BoarControl had positioned himself to have full health and the 5 armor and a full hand of cards, right? Is like, is this Mali really going to live? Especially that there was just an 8-8 still on board too. A lot of things would have to go terribly wrong there for BoarControl, such as playing a Murzond into that turn for Casie to have any hope at that point. So I don't really want to say a rough game for Casie because, yeah, it's unfortunate he didn't draw the full combo, but he drew almost all of it. I guess the Elic is the question mark of part of the problem in that he did end up shuffling a few extra cards in the deck, which maybe made it a little bit worse. But overall, I will say I think BoarControl handled that game very well from the Priest side of things.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's fair to say that the Elic completely screwed him. Like, I don't want to say we've just watched Teacher's Pet decide 2 games, but it kind of feels like we've watched Teacher's Pet decide 2 games, because the first one, it was a 1 in 17 for Boar to hit the Mukla, which was the only minion he was scared of in that scenario. And in the second one, it was the 1 in 17 for Casie to hit the Educated Elic, which was the only minion that he was scared of in that example. And then even then, from Casey's side, he, before the Elic died, did exactly what he was supposed to do. Draw as many cards as possible to get to that Omu before Boar could stack a bunch of spells on it itself and then kill it and then deny that combo kill, right? And even then, he was unlucky to not find any of the extra tools that he needed. So, yeah, I think we can very, very fairly say that that was a pretty rotten outcome for Casie in the second game, but a pretty rotten outcome for Boar in the first.
So here, going into the final game of this series, a reminder is best of 3. BoarControl, without too much surprise, has stuck to his tertiary list, which means he is playing the list he played in the last game as well, with some of that extra value you can see in his hand, actually, right now. Finally, though, Casie gets hold of an early overgrowth, which is going to feel a little bit better than he was feeling last game and the game before, not really having access to huge ramp potential early on.
Boar digging hard, but he finds utter garbage.
How?
Anubis Defender Guardian Animals does have that sick synergy, though. There is that going for him.
I'm just, like, quadruple checking that there's no just, like, random beasts in BoarControl's deck. But there aren't, right?
Meanwhile, it's just a turn 4 Ysera Unleashed. It's turn 4, everyone.
I do love watching this. Casie was like, oh, he's not got an answer to my turn for you, Sarah, has he? Oh, it looks so great. I do love watching these two players especially. I do love watching when they're playing a game of Hearthstone. It is awesome to watch.
Very emotive human beings, indeed.
Yeah. They get access to the ramp, but quite frankly, Casie doesn't really need it right now. Does just get the card draw, but it's going to take him just a little bit to get going here. The overflow is going to be nice, but again, it's almost a pass turn, maybe the help of the Anubisath. But BoarControl, although fighting back a big amount of ramp, is actually just playing full aggro.
Don't forget there are 7 Dragon Portals in his deck, so it's not as pass turn as you might expect initially.
Yeah, I forgot there was just a Ysera on turn 1 or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. The developers decided that Demon Hunter's hero power is just a little bit too strong, so they've adjusted everyone else's hero power, and Druids is just start the game with 7 Dragon Portals in your deck and a Ysera Unleashed on board.
Ooh, and the wince from BoarControl. Just does not want to see the board filled with dragons, and I think he's going to get his wish. Wow.
He is going to get his wish. He lives to tell the tale, at least for now, but certainly not in any kind of good position right now.
Does have the Kaj with Broom combo. Which can just not only create a minion in its death rattle, but use a charge to just help clear this board up. It's just what's the best follow up here? Does he just dodge that completely and check Spellkin first? Because My worry about playing the Spellkin this turn is it deactivates the Murazond potential next turn, which I think is a very powerful option for BoarControl in the future.
Yeah, it could be, right? I think there's potential for Murazond to be powerful on any given turn. But I think one of the big issues is that Casie already ripped his Overflow, which I think is one of the things that Boar would certainly have been trying to copy with the Murazond a lot of the time, just to make sure he had options. So maybe Boar feels like the value of that immediately has gone down somewhat. Getting this Cobalt Spellkin played, can hit Renew for some answers, Renew into Soul Mirror kind of stuff, and also just Wave of Apathy, which is insane in most scenarios, in most matchups, but I would say particularly so against Druid.
I think you could have just stopped it insane. That Wave of Apathy, it's insane.
Yeah.
Full stop.
That's fair.
It's just true. It's just a great
Very
card.
Very fair.
Gidra coming down now, Casie. Snap playing Gidra with the Guardian Animal Guardian Animals follow-up. I will try and get my words out properly. Looking very solid. Twilight Runner, additional 2 cards, and this Gidra can just clean up a good chunk of this board.
Casie not yet sure where he wants these trades to be going.
Oh. Not the turn BoarControl really wanted to see here, was it? This looks like it might be slipping away at this point.
Yikes. That is a board state. Yeah, this looked very Soul Mirror or bust, and Boar appears to be on the bust side of that equation.
And that's one of the issues with the matchup, isn't it? Priest can take this, no problem, or take Druid in general, but you are relying on like big answers to the Druid big turns, and it just isn't there, right, for BoarControl this turn.
17 damage in play, spell damage +2. It's 29. Yeah, double swipe hero power is just lethal, wasn't it? 17 +12 +2. I assume whatever he's doing here is also lethal.
Just fancier. Wait, trading?
I mean, he has a Mali now. I mean, this is as I confirmed. This is also lethal. It's just I'm pretty sure he just had lethal with the cards already in his hand, but maybe he just knew. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe I was wrong. Who knows? All of those are possible outcomes.
Yep. None of them matter now, though. Casie takes the series 2-1 over BoarControl, moving on to the upper side of the group. And I think we got... there were really good and bad outcomes across the board there and across the games. But I think you start to really see, if you're not used to seeing much Mali Druid versus Priest on ladder or in general, you start to see why people like to be the Mali Druid in that scenario, right? Because Priest often gives them enough time to just piece together all that card draw, and then suddenly the Priest outside of very niche scenarios doesn't really have counterplay to getting Malygos comboed, right? There's no setup you can do. There's no guaranteed armor gain apart from the 5 from the Galakron. If you find time to spend 7 mana and kill one thing versus Druid at that point, which I think is also very difficult to do unless you're in some great control. So it is just an uphill climb, and I think this is why not only did we see Tice do well yesterday with Mali Druid, but I am expecting for Casie to continue to do well today.
Yeah, I think some of the complaints early on about that matchup were like, oh, they just mind render me and then play all my burn spells and I can't win anymore. But, even then, like, even if that happens and they mind render the perfect hand and they get to play like swipe double Moonfire or whatever alongside their mind render, you still just have the ability to win on board with Dream Portals, with Malygos Germination, with Gidra Germination. You have all these plays to generate huge board states and just win on board anyway. And with this list now that Tice and Casie are running, with the Geppetto cut, the opportunity to get punished by Mind Render is so much slimmer now because they can't ever Mind Render your one-cost power minions. That's just not a thing that you play in your deck. So, I said right at the start, I felt like Tice qualifying could be a good omen for Casie, just in terms of this Mali Druid's performance, and I think that's showing to be the case so far.
Yeah, and the big thing to remember as well is Mind Render is one card in the whole deck. For every card Priest draws, Druid draws like 5. So they're just going to get all their cards quicker than you might even see a Mind Render, which means that if the answer is they Mind Render you and win, well, how often do they draw Mind Render at the right time? Not that often, really, if you actually look at the numbers. So, again, pretty impressive for Casie there, but his opponent is by no means out. So we are going to see BoarControl a little bit later in that lower bracket match, but we are going to have a reminder as well. The 2 players that go through make into Division A, and the 2 that don't, and they're going to end in Division B. So a lot on the line